Imagine the silence of a mountain summit, no fanfare, no press gaggle, no handshake parade, then a political earthquake strikes. Before Air Force One even touched down in Alberta, Prime Minister Mark Carney seized the diplomatic vacuum left by President Trump's abrupt absence from the G7 table. In those first tense moments, Canada didn't just step into the void, it reshaped it. Carney inked an Arctic-Pacific defense pact with South Korea, pledged $544 million in Latin American development guarantees, sealed a critical minerals alliance with Europe and Asia, and declared, "Nostalgia is not a strategy." That line said it all. This wasn't a temporary power grab. It was a signal that the old Washington-centric order is crumbling, and a new hub of global influence might be rising in the north. Here's what that means, and why it matters to you. These G7 summits exist to build consensus among world powers. Leaders gather to foster cooperation on trade, climate, security. They issue communiques, share statements, and broaden their unified vision. But in Alberta, the script flipped. Trump left, the table lay empty, and Canada grabbed the MIC overnight. It spearheaded diplomacy in defense, development, critical infrastructure. A middle power moving fast, stealthily reshaping alliances. The defense shift was not symbolic, it was structural. Carney met with South Korea's President Lee Jung to forge a groundbreaking pact. In Canada's Arctic patrols, surveillance sensors will be built in Seoul. In British Columbia, South Korea will produce hybrid-powered patrol vessels. For decades, Five Eyes and Arctic defense were America-dominated. That dynamic just changed. Introducing new partners transforms military architecture and introduces real redundancy at the northern edge of global stability. Then came the financial pivot. Just when Washington was slashing USAID by $60 billion, Canada stepped in with a $544 million fund backing infrastructure, climate resilience, and clean energy in Latin America and the Caribbean. Instead of grants, Canada opted for investment guarantees, leveraging private capital. They are betting on cocoa processing in Colombia, wind farms in Jamaica, even insurance for climate risks in Honduras. It's not charity, it's strategy. Canada is stepping into America's economic shadow in new ways, offering emerging markets initiative and investment. It's more than money. This fund is diplomatic capital, giving Canada leverage and influence in a region where the US was retreating. Latin American leaders welcomed the invitation, development analysts are taking note, and the region's shift reinforces Canada's credibility as a global partner. But perhaps the most ambitious move, the Critical Minerals Pact. Canada hosts massive deposits of nickel, cobalt, rare earths, gallium, germanium, the essential elements fueling EVs, chips, aerospace, defense systems. Germany agreed to refine Canadian nickel and cobalt. South Korea will provide battery cell technology. Japan brings recycling and quantum data sophistication. Canada sends high-purity gallium to Europe. Suddenly, a resilient tech supply chain emerges, spanning Vancouver to Tokyo, engineered to hedge against Chinese dominance. It's not just economic foresight, it's geopolitical strategy. Then there were the subtler, but no less powerful initiatives. Canada signed a mutual data handling agreement with Japan on AI and quantum computing, and Germany. Visitors heard announcements about joint photonic labs, zero-energy chip testing, leveraged satellite data for forest fire prediction. Those innovations demonstrate a multilateral push toward climate resilience, national security, digital sovereignty, without the US branding. Carney's statement on nostalgia is not a strategy, was more than a critique, it was a declaration. Canada was refusing to go back to predictable, Washington-led globalism. It was recalibrating toward a multipolar, networked diplomacy. It wasn't just talk. Reporters and diplomats weren't allowed into high-level bilateral meetings. This was sovereignty in motion, not pageantry. Canada didn't just make alliances, it wielded them. It shaped narrative, reconfigured the summit's agenda, and did it quietly and deliberately. By contrast, Trump left with no victory to show. No photo op. No communique. Just rhetoric, more volatility, more isolation. His calls for 5% defense budgets were dismissed. His tariffs were rebutted with Canada's strategic commitments. While global press waited on reaction, the conference table became a chessboard of influence relocation. But let's be clear, this is not a Canada-centric coup. The summit's fractures revealed an international malaise. Australia watches in Asia, weighing options. Germany is reprogramming its supply chains. Japan just fled to the WTO over steel classifications. Mexico prepared legal memos. India got invited despite diplomatic tensions, suggesting that a revitalized G7 might be less an inner club and more an open network. Today, emerging global players see new lanes, mid-tier powers find leverage. When Canada rushed into roles reserved for the US, finance, defense, minerals, they demonstrated how alliances can repair themselves without Washington. That shift is a template for politicians deciding whether to remain tethered to US commands or chart independent paths. And it's a geopolitical inflection point. The evolution of policy from dollar-driven diplomacy to distributed, sovereign initiative. It raises questions that will echo far beyond Alberta. Will NATO meetings follow? When Brussels opens its doors, will Canada push Arctic missile defense? Will Japan step into Pacific patrol talks? Will Germany secure robotics for minerals contracts? Each summit will increase the pressure on structural influence. Here's another angle: polar recalibration. As Arctic ice melts, it opens opportunity and risk, contested sea lanes, territorial claims, missile corridors. Canada wasn't just signing a defense pact. It positioned itself at the vanguard of Arctic security architecture. Pentagon presence won't vanish, but the center shifted. The Northern Hemisphere got a new frontier leader, and it wasn't the United States. But can Canada sustain this? US pushback is coming, through trade flexibility, tariff changes, intelligence pressure, some combination of soft and hard power. But Canada has strategic momentum, diplomatic ties, and a growing multilateral base. The US still matters. But it cannot unilaterally recenter the table. The multipolar alternative is growing, and that's a structural shift. Even more, economic cohesion. Those mineral supply chains aren't just theory, they are industrial coordination. Canadian nickel flows into German processing, battery systems flow to Asia, EVs get built. When global firms follow those pipelines, the North America-Europe-Asia axis becomes real, not just aspirational. That's economic sovereignty in practice. And on climate tech, Canada is planting early warning forest networks, satellite sensors, AI data labs. That's transnational environmental diplomacy without strings. A precedent for 21st century climate collaboration that isn't under US command, but under consensus and reciprocity. That begs the bigger question: what's next? Canada has planted seeds, but now it must harvest. Will it negotiate long-term trade agreements? Will it expand its defense footprint with Arctic patrol infrastructure? Will the Latin America fund grow to billions? Will Canada's alliances formalize? Negotiations loom over economic security pacts, tariff reconciliations, critical minerals management, defense spending, NATO commitments. Whether Canada amplifies its voice or becomes a flashpoint depends on what happens next. And at those future tables, the US will need a choice: adapt, collaborate, or resist. The alternative is a world where multiple centers, Canada, EU, Japan, India, function with layered influence. That could divide the West, or diversify it, from rivalries to productive pluralism. So now it's your turn. Did Canada just build a new global center of gravity in Alberta? Or did we just witness diplomatic chaos, where alliances splinter and global coordination crumbles? Is this Canada holding the torch of constructive internationalism, or a risky directionless gamble? Will NATO meetings rebalance power? Will Germany, Japan, Australia join this wave? Or will American pushback reassert the old order? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your insights. This reset moment in global diplomacy is happening right now, and your view matters. If you want to see where this takes us, to NATO, to trade corridors, to climate coalitions, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. We are entering a new era of pole-shifting power, and we'll unpack every move together as it unfolds.